You're listening to Bigfoot Society, and I'm Jeremiah Byron. In this show, we go beyond the campfire stories to bring you firsthand encounters from people who say they've seen something impossible, from backwoods trails and remote mountain haulers to quiet farms and crowded highways. The stories come from everywhere, and each one leaves us with more questions than answers. These are the voices of the people who've lived it, so settle in, because today you'll hear another account that just might change the way you see the woods forever. So stay with us. All right, Bigfoot Society, you've got the privilege of talking to Joy today. Joy's an individual that reached out to me after the episode I did on the Belt Road Booger down there in Georgia. And she's got some interesting things to share from her perspective about what she's experienced down there. So welcome to the show, Joy. How are you doing today?
Hey, Jeremiah. I'm doing all right. How about you?
Having a great day. It's actually pretty nice out here in Iowa. It's starting to go down and, kind of hit the 60s and the 50s. So cannot complain. I'm enjoying it. But, I want to make sure that you have the time to share what you've experienced. And we'll probably be chatting along the way, it sounds like, about this. But, feel free to take us back to, when you started having experiences with Bigfoot down in this area.
In actuality, I didn't really have my own personal experiences until 2022. But I grew up in South Fulton County, which now city of South Fulton, but back in the 80s. And my great-great-grandparents, we were the first ones that were on this particular road. The house they built was in 1908, I think. And I grew up hearing stories about the Crumpton Booger, which I later found out it's the Compton. The Comptons were actually the ones that had this booger that would sit in their cattle fields. But my granny would tell me that I think she had seen it, the way she talked. I was just a little kid then. But she said it was always described as a white dog that would sit in the Crumpton's cattle field. So this Crumpton Booger, my uncles and cousins and everybody in the whole area knew about it. My Uncle Hubert, he would tell stories about it. I never heard his stories, just, the one that my granny had said about, that encounter. But my dad's brother, I had heard a story about him and one of his buddies coming back from, this was probably in the 50s, as far as the timeline and this sort of thing. I'm not exactly sure. Like I said, I was a kid. But something had chased him and his buddy in the woods. And when he got home, it was reported to, what the story that was told to me, that he was very scared and shaken up about it. Didn't know what it was, didn't see anything. And of course, my Uncle Harvey, he would do wood route back when my dad was a kid. And, he would, allude to, sometimes there'd be something out there. And I'd asked my dad about it. My dad said he had never heard anything. He actually laughed at me after I told him I'd had my sightings where I live now. But the Belt Road Booger, I had gotten married in the late 80s, early 90s. I had moved, my husband then, and I had moved down to Coweta County, just outside of Palmetto. It's a Noonan address. It's back toward Cochran Mill and all this sort of thing. And I had never heard anything when I was living down there about a Belt Road Booger or anything like that. But when we were building the house in 1990, my husband then had gone down to the house to backfill or something. It's late at night after he'd gotten in from work. Again, I don't know what this was or what it was, but he came back to the house telling me that something down there screamed and scared him to death. And of course, he grew up, rural, Fulton County. He had hunted, he fished, and all this kind of stuff. He had been an outdoors kind of person. He said he didn't know what that was. He just knows that it scared him to death. And he came running home. He left out of there in a hurry from the house we were building. Yeah. And let's see. I drove a truck for a couple of years. And of course, I've heard all these stories about, people seeing things on the road, driving a truck. I don't want to say fortunately or unfortunately, I never saw anything. And we used to run I-40 all the time. my co-driver, and I never saw anything.
What were the kind of things that you would hear from other drivers about that area?
Well, I never really heard anything from other drivers. The only thing I heard is like recently, within the last 5 years, listening to podcasts and things about different drivers and things. Because I know I was listening to one last night, and the driver was talking about Palestine, Arkansas, and he had said him and this other driver were the only two on I-40 headed east, and said one jumped the 6-foot fence, came across 2 lanes, jumped the 4-foot median, went across, and then jumped the 6-foot fence onto the other side. I never saw anything like that. And, and I've heard another story about around Huntsville. I think it was a magazine delivery guy or something, I'm not sure, about where he had broke down, and, he had come face to face with one. He was had to relieve himself out the side of his van, and one sort of came up upon him, and it scared him to death. And I remember the podcast, and it scared him really bad. And I'm thankful I never saw anything like that. But I do remember when I was a kid too, camping and hearing weird noises. And, camping, you kind of write it off as whatever. Who knows what it was? And in listening to all these stories now, the podcast, you have to kind of look back, and I just kind of wonder what they might have been, if it could have been a Bigfoot.
All the things that you said at the beginning of the interview, are those from the same county as when where your husband had that, he heard that scream?
That was in Coweta County.
Okay.
Where he heard that. It's just across the Fulton County line, not too far from Cochran Mill Park, which I think was mentioned on the Belt Road Booger.
Yes, absolutely. The stories you heard from growing up, were those also in the same county or a different county?
Yeah, all in South Fulton County.
Okay.
It wasn't Coweta County, but it was in the very near vicinity. It was near Fairburn, Georgia, where all this was going on.
Gotcha. And you said you had some things happen when you were a Girl Scout leader?
Yeah, I was about to say I was a Girl Scout leader, and we had gone camping at the Girl Scout camp in Savannah. And of course, the leaders have separate tents from the girls, and all the girls were, I think we had maybe 6 or 8 girls. And it was platform tent camping. And the girls started hollering, Miss Joy, we've got, something's out here, help, not help, but, we're scared kind of thing. And of course, I'd heard scratching around, and I think it was an armadillo that was under my platform tent. But I did hear something walking, of course, with girls. And of course, there's, we were kind of on the far side of the camp, but you never know what other kids are doing. And I know there were lots of deer out there, and I never heard anything, but it did sound like something bipedal walking out there. And I don't know what scared the girls. They kept telling me it wasn't a deer, because I kind of thought it might have been a deer. And I'm like, no, it's not a deer. I don't know what it was. It wasn't a deer. So I don't know what had scared the girls. And, I look back over this stuff, and it's like, just these minor little details that you don't know what to attribute it to would make some great scary stories, but you don't know, can't say there was Sasquatch. It's just some kind of creepy stuff that would creep the kids out. And then let's see. Okay. South Fulton County, got remarried. Anyway, I currently live in northwestern Georgia. Further, it's about an hour northwest of where I used to live. And we live in the middle of the woods. I've always lived in the middle of the woods. Always. And back in 2021, I had a friend who, I don't know if they had just started watching Bigfoot Expedition or Expedition Bigfoot, whatever it is. And they had asked me, do you believe in Bigfoot? And I thought, oh yeah, there's one in, Washington somewhere. And, I'm pretty sure there is one. And I grew up, my mom was all into the alien, UFO, Star Trek, all this kind of stuff, paranormal, so I kind of grew up with some of that in the house, unsolved mysteries and search of. Well, anyway, so I moved out here, and after that, my friend had asked me about, did I believe in it? I thought, wow, at the time I was working night and I was listening to podcasts. I thought, well, let me just Google Sasquatch and let me see what's out there for a podcast. And I started listening to podcasts. And of course, I think, yours, among others, the one I was listening to at the time was Sasquatch Chronicles. And at the intro, of course, have this whoop, whoop on there. And I was binging this. It's like, I get up for work late in the evening, get ready, head out the door, and I'm just listening to this stuff in the truck on the way back and forth. And that started, like the end of December, I started listening. And I think it was I want to say it was January 21st or 25th, or I can't remember, my first actual sighting. I had gone out in the carport, got my truck, backed out, started out the end of the driveway. We have kind of a long driveway, and got to the end of it. And of course, I love wildlife. Like I said, I've always lived in the woods. I pulled out in the driveway, and across the road, I saw these two red eyes. And I thought, that's interesting. Maybe, it's an owl or something, because, my headlights were kind of pointed over that way, but the headlights didn't penetrate the woods on that side of the road really. But, I just kind of wrote it off. Well, turned right, and I kind of got this feeling telling me to look to my left. And Jeremiah, these two red eyes, glowing red eyes, were looking at me in through my truck window. I mean, it was, all the weeks of podcasts that I've been listening to, I was amazed. I mean, it was a surreal experience. It's kind of creepy. But anyway, so this thing is staring at me, and I'm staring at it, and it looked at me, and I know people talk about mind speak telepathy. It asked me, it said, "Who are you?" Almost like it was surprised that I wasn't one of them or something. And the best I could figure is they had heard these whoops constant, in and out, me listening to this podcast. And I just thought back to it. It's like, they asked me, "Who are you?" And I said, look, while I was looking at it, I just thought back at it and said, "Who are you?" And I'm like, oh crap, I got to get to work. This is just crazy. So I sped up, and this thing was keeping up with my truck as I'm going along, looking at it, thinking about it. And I had to have been going about 30 miles an hour maybe. And these eyes were about 8 inches apart, and they were, I don't know, probably about the twice the size of a human. And aside from the fact that they were kind of red, you could tell behind the redness, or pink, it's kind of a reddish pink, like if you put your finger over a flashlight or something, you could see the iris and the whites of the eyes, and you could see that behind it. It was, I don't know, it was just surreal. So anyway, over the course of the next year and year and 6 months, I don't know, it was over a year. But anyway, for the next several weeks and months, it would be like every few weeks I would see something. And then after that, it was, anyway, I'm sorry, I get flustered. I mean, I try not to think a whole lot about it. It's like I really honestly don't go outside much anymore. It's like no, you don't know what's in the woods.
Absolutely. And you're doing great. I know that, a lot of times you share what you've gone through, and it can put you right back in that state emotionally. And I just want to say thank you for everything that you are able to share. It can be a very tough situation. You're doing a great job.
Yeah. I'm still trying to convince myself that it's real. I mean, in the literal sense of surreal, it's exactly what it was. It's like something out of a movie. Like I don't want to believe it, but I know it's completely and totally real. But anyway, over the next several weeks, there was an instance where I looked over in the woods a little further up the road, and the red-eyed thing was in the woods, and there were about, I think, 4 or 5 other eyes. These were kind of the yellowish eyes that were lower down, like the thing was like beside a tree, and these other ones were around it like they were crouched down or something. I saw that, and I just like, okay, I just didn't like it's not there, and I just kept on going. Well, a few weeks later, I was on my way to work, further down my path on the way to work. I looked over in one of our neighbors' pastures, And there's only 2 trees in the pasture. Well, this night there was, well, quote unquote, another tree that didn't have any limbs, and it was about 7.5 feet tall, and it was kind of grayish, and it was very still, and it was literally next to the fence that was just right up close to the road. It didn't move. It was like a statue standing there. And I knew what it was. It's like I said, you just you just don't want to believe it. So anyway, after that, there was another instance. I was going up the same path on one side of the road, kind of up in the woods. There was one set of the yellow glowing eyes. It was like it was crouched down, looking out over the pasture, like maybe it was looking for deer. Because I mean, we have so many deer and so many wild turkey out here. It's not even funny. And again, I was going down the road, further down the mountain. Of course, it's not really a mountain. It's more like rolling hills, high hills or whatever around here. Anyway, going down the mountain, and this is crazy. It was probably about 250 yards away, maybe a couple of football fields or so. And I saw it. It's like I didn't see it come onto the road, but when I saw it, it was on the like oncoming side of the traffic, left side of the road from me. And it was running. It was starting to run. And its knees were bent. It was kind of I don't know if it was a grayish golden. I don't know, because we don't have many street lights, but in this case, it was close to one of the telephone poles, with the light on it, type street light thing somebody had put out there. And when it started to run, its feet, I say it's cartoon-like, because it just was going so fast that it started to blur, and the hair on it was blowing backwards, like you'd see like in some of these model commercials where they have this, big, huge fan blowing on somebody and their hair is blown back. And it got to going so fast that it started to look like a puff of smoke, a fog or something. And I watched it go across the road, and then I don't know if it's just, again, my brain trying to block out whatever, but I didn't see it. Because there's like vegetation, shrubs, tall weeds, whatever over there. And I don't know if it had gone over and just dropped to the ground and I couldn't see it when I got up close to where it had gone to, or if it had, people talk about portals and all this stuff. I don't really believe in that. I honestly think that these things have capabilities beyond what science has really been able to deal with quite yet. But I think they vibrate so fast that we can't see them. And it kind of, like you watch the Flash TV show or whatever, how they get to running so fast, and then, they can run through objects, solid objects, and they become a blur. That kind of thing is kind of, I think these have some sort of strange capabilities like that. And then I think if there's, the things that happen around here, which in and amongst all this time, my husband came up missing. I always think it's funny, the jack stands. He had four orange jack stands, and 3 came up missing. It's like, who's going to take 3 jack stands and not the 4th? Like I said, we live in the woods. We can see one neighbor when, in the wintertime when all the leaves are off the tree that are on the next hill over. But other than that, there's really not anybody around here.
Sorry, I want to clarify something real quick. So you're saying, I just want to make sure I got what was being taken.
Yeah, the jack stand, like you jack your car up to work on it or whatever.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like you get it Harbor Freight or something.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyway, 3 of those had just disappeared off the property. We don't know what happened to them, and we don't know anybody that would take 3 and not 4. That's one of the weird things. And on my truck during all this time, the wheel weights, usually, when you get your wheels balanced, they put the wheel weights on the inside of your wheels. For whatever reason, the folks I take mine to put them on the outside of the wheel. Well, anyway, one Saturday, my husband was out cutting grass, and he's like, what is this I keep, running over? And looked, and it was wheel weights, and looked on my truck, my wheel weights. All the wheel weights on my truck were not on my truck. it's like, who's going to come and take my wheel weights off? I mean, seriously. And another time, shortly thereafter, there were these fingertip prints. It's like, I think there was 3 or 4. I've got a picture. It's kind of hard to tell in the light because I've got a white truck, and it was just very light, kind of a grayish black smudge, not really, kind of a powdery type gray smudge or whatever. I can't remember, it was 3 or 4 fingertip prints kind of on my truck. And they were too wide to be my son. Like I said, I've got a picture of this. I can send you pictures and things. And I guess because I had been out of work, it's like I'd taken some time off. And I don't know if they were looking to find me in my truck or thought I was part of my truck, or, like a turtle thought, I was like the turtle in the shell or something, and they were looking for me. That's the only thing I can figure out, because it was toward the back quarter panel on the driver's side of the truck, like it might have been trying to look through my windows. Of course, the back windows are dark. I have a SUV, and weird stuff like that. And then, I would hear noises outside, and I would turn on the floodlight, and, of course, the floodlight right here at the back corner of the deck, and I couldn't see anything. I wouldn't see anything. Well, there was a tree that the top of it had come down, and it literally came down right on the tree line, which I just thought that was weird, that a tree would come down and it's literally on the tree line. Like I said, I'm not saying that I believe this or can attribute anything to Sasquatch or whatever, but it's just kind of odd, because that's where I feel like they would be, is where this tree fell, because they could look in that window and watch TV with us if they wanted to, where the tree line where that tree fell. And I've heard anecdotal stories, that these things will, put sticks or rocks or something to mark out where if lights come on, because I've heard that lights will, make these things scatter or not come around. And I've got a picture of it. It's kind of hard to see because I took it out the window, of exactly where a floodlight lights up right there at the corner. There's 2 sticks where the far side of the light would be on the ground. And my son at the time was walking up to the corner. I don't know if it might be a quarter mile or so to the bus stop to get on the bus. And one day he said he was coming home, and he tells me he saw a bear in the woods. I don't think it was a bear. We do have bears around here, but they're, like small black bears. And he said this was a brown bear, which, I don't think it was a brown black bear, which I know there are brown black bears, but
sure,
I don't think it was one of the bears around here. I think it was something else. One night before I had my sightings, I don't know how soon before, my husband never really did say, but he was coming home one night and he saw something red glowing in the woods on our side of the road, on our property. And he said it got him so curious that he actually stopped his truck, got out, and went and looked, shone the flashlight around in the woods. Said he didn't see anything. Who knows? Who knows what the heck it was? And kind of to back before I actually had my sighting, there's some back dirt roads and shortcuts you can take through, around here to get to the school or to get to the grocery store, because we're, the closest anything's like 15, 20 minutes away. And one of the back roads I was on, there was a deer carcass, like somebody had just killed it and thrown it out there. The whole thing, only the gut pile was laying out next to it. And this is like 2010, maybe. Don't remember exactly when. But yeah, it was laying there. The antlers were there. The head was there. I mean, if it was a poacher, you'd think it would have cut the back strap out or would have taken the antlers or something. But it's like the whole deer was laying there and this gut pile laying there, like they had started to gut it. I've heard stories that that's what Sasquatch does. I don't know. It was one of these, dirt back roads that I was taking. I think, what else has there been? Oh, the scariest, but before my sightings, this was probably about 2007, after my son was born. It was one of those, mild kind of early, or actually late winter, mild mornings, and I'd had the windows open here in the kitchen area, and I was cleaning. My kids were still in the bed. My son was, an infant. And I walked toward the kitchen. I heard this scream, snort, huff noise, nothing like I had ever heard before in my entire life. Scared me. I stopped dead in my tracks. It scared me. I'm like, what the heck is that? It did not. I don't know. I mean, like I said, it was like a screech, a snort, and a huff, just all kind of roll one right into the other. And I talked to my aunt about it. She's like, "Oh, it's a deer and rut." I'm like, "No, you got it on the internet." I got it on the internet. It's like, nope, not a deer and rut, not that, not that. And go through the whole animal sound. No, it was nothing I had ever heard before. Nothing I could find on the internet. And then there's that. I have heard, when we first moved out here, I thought maybe one of the neighbors, way back on the other side of the woods, was chopping wood or something, because you hear this whack whack, and I would always be kind of curious, because it would only be 2 whacks, and who's going to chop wood and only do 2 whacks? But you just kind of write it off as maybe some kid in the woods or something, and that would go on off and on. And I've never heard any of the Ohio howl or the Sierra. I've never heard anything like that, but I've heard something out here that sounds cross between a hound dog and a coyote. It's and there's nobody on this side, close as a hound dog. A coyote's out here, and I don't know. It could have been a weird coyote, but it's been frequent enough that you kind of have to wonder, what is it? I have to wonder. It's like like I said, I don't know if it's coyote or maybe somebody I don't know has a hound dog somewhere, but it's one of these weird sounds that doesn't exactly sound right. And okay, jump back. Let's talk about being scared. Also, the 600-pound owl thing. As I was walking out one night, when I was walking out to get my tractor to go to work, I heard an owl right across out of the carport in the wood line. This big owl. I mean, it would have had to have been a huge owl if it were an owl. And there was another one back on the turnaround of the driveway over in that side of the woods. Of course, it's pitch black. All this is taking place at night. I heard another one. And then kind of over further down the driveway on the other side, kind of behind the house, there was another one. That's all I could do to get out the door to make myself walk. I mean, just to walk around the back of my truck to go get in. I mean, it just, I don't know. Like I said, I saw, 2 different times the eyes. I saw the one in the pasture. I saw the one running across the road. And then my son, who played in the band, and I think it was October 22, I think it was, I had gone down to get him after a football game. And this is the one that really tore me up. As I was going down, it was further up than where I saw the other one running across the road. This one was on the oncoming on the left side of the road, looking at me as I was going down the road. It looked like a gorilla with saucer size eyes. I mean, like voids. Like I don't know if you ever watched Land of the Lost. I don't know how old you are. The Land of the Lost that used to come on Saturday mornings, and the flea stack with the big giant eyes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure.
That's what it looked like. Yeah, that type eyes. That's just black voids is what it looked like, and it was the color of night. I mean, it's like if your headlight with the headlight, it's like it was the same color as foliage in the night and the surrounding, and but it had the gorilla face. This one was probably maybe 6 foot tall, and from what I've talked to different people and things and heard things, it might have been a juvenile. I don't know. And 2, I've heard things again through podcasts and talking to people that maybe they look more like apes when they're born and they start getting the more human type face as they get older. It's what I've heard. So I don't know. It might have been a juvenile. Otherwise, it's an escaped gorilla. I don't I don't know of any escaped gorillas around here. No zoos anywhere close. And I cried all the way after I saw that thing. I'm just like, Lord, why? Why are you showing me these things? It's scary to know all the times I've been in the woods and these things have been there. And that brings me back. It's like another time I had walked into the woods, just, it's like one of those days I just had to go, and I had to walk back to the creek, and I was sitting back there and I was having a good cry, and I heard something move, and I thought, well, maybe it's a squirrel. And I looked around to see where the squirrel might have been, and I didn't see anything. And then all of a sudden I heard these footsteps, like it was somebody. That's my cat, by the way. And I said, hello, is anybody there? And I didn't hear anything. And I didn't hear anything again. And all of a sudden the hairs on the back of my neck just kind of stood up. And I'm just like, oh gosh, this is creepy. Let me get out of here. So I left and came back to the house. But I don't know. I mean, just the stuff you grew up with. And I know these, my granny believed they were real. My uncles believed they were real. Too many anecdotal evidence. People find footprints, which around here, there's nowhere to get footprints. It's like we have a gravel driveway and, hardwoods and pines and lots of leaf litter, and there's nowhere for any footprints to be. So people who don't believe that there's Sasquatch, I feel bad for them. And I kind of feel blessed to know that they're there, and kind of cursed to know that they're there, because I can't enjoy the outdoors like I used to. You know what I mean?
No, I definitely do.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about Northwest Georgia right now, correct?
Yeah, we're talking about Northwest Georgia. Yeah, where I currently live. That's where I've had all my experiences. But yeah, I believe that was a dog man which I don't know if the Belt Road Booger, back to that, I don't know if that was the dog man he was talking about or what, but I think that was the Crumpton Booger I was told about. I believe that was a dog man. And I don't know if you know the author Ann River Siddons, she's deceased, but she had, if you Google it, Ann River Siddons Atlanta magazine, and the interviewer asked her about her favorite myth or legend, and she actually mentioned the Crumpton Booger, and the way she describes it, very interesting. Yeah, there's all down in South Fulton area. There's, the Crumpton Booger was the thing, and not the Belt Road. But
just to double check, this area, because I've talked to a few people over the years about Northwest Georgia. There are so many different areas in Northwest Georgia that have Bigfoot activity. It is absolutely crazy. We're leaving it at the general area of Northwest Georgia, correct?
Well, I mean, I could get more specific and say we're probably about 30, 40 minutes north of I-20.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and there's a gentleman that actually has a podcast, and he does research, and I got in contact with him, and he's had activity on his property, and he's, I don't know, not far from here at all. I mean, probably 15 minutes from here. So, and I kind of laughed with the kids and said, that's probably the reason because I haven't seen or heard anything in the last couple of years out of the stuff here, which of course, like I said, I haven't been outside and as much as I've been, and I don't work nights anymore either. So it is what it is.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. I mean, you go through situations like this and it really, really does affect you. And I don't know if people can understand that unless they've actually gone through that situation. And that gentleman, I can't even, if that gentleman's listening, I'd love to talk to you. In the area that you've been having these things happen, have you ever talked to your neighbors to see if they've been experiencing things as well?
Oh, yeah. I'm glad you asked.
All right.
I asked my friend, I said, what do you think about Bigfoot? And she said, oh, yeah. She said, there's a family that lives over there on the mountain. I said, really? I said, you've never said anything? She said, no. She said, her mom, which her mom's probably about 10 years older than I am. She said, oh, yeah, my mom grew up over in such and such area. And she said, yeah, so when they were kids, they were out, a bunch of neighborhood kids, about 6 or 8 of them were out, I don't know exactly how many, were out playing in the, one of the yards, and one of these things stepped out of the woods and was looking at them. And I talked to her mom, and her mom has had bukus of sightings, noises, creepy stuff that you just wouldn't believe. She's seen orbs, the whole thing. I can give you her name and number, which she's already said that, she'd be happy to do an interview.
To talk to her as well. Yeah, thank you. Yep.
Uh-huh. And yeah, so that's that. And then one of the neighbors was coming down the road. And sometimes they'll do, if you happen to be coming out your driveway and somebody's coming by, they'll stop, chit chat. And I had asked this one neighbor, I said, have you seen any strange things, like Bigfoot, Sasquatch, or anything? I mean, he laughed. He said, oh, yeah, this is the thing about this out here. He said, yeah, he said, back before we moved out here, he said, we owned the property, and said, I'd go hunting over there. And there was one, he said it was a cold, and he said after it had ice, snowed a little bit, he said, I was over there hunting, and I was looking, and one slid down an embankment, and said, as it slid down, it turned around and looked at me. And I'm just like, okay, nobody around here talks about it, but it's kind of like one of these normal things. And I'm just like, wow, okay. And there's actually a wildlife management area. I guess it's probably about 40 minutes from here, I guess. And there's one of the roads over there. It's known as, what was it, Hairy Man Road or something like that. And then there's actually just west of here, off of 27, there's, Booger Hollow Road or some Booger Road. I don't know. All these kind of weird, references to what things around here. And then I was talking to my boss at the time when I was working night, and her dad was part of the tribe or out here, the Cherokee tribe. And they would have their talks, their little powwows or whatever they call them. And she said her dad would go to these things and she would be there. And she said the elder that would tell the stories told some really scary stories about stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's out here, and I think most everybody knows about it. And those who don't are, blissfully ignorant.
I don't doubt that you mentioned the scary stories from those individuals, and I don't doubt it. I mean, this area that we're talking about, I've talked to other individuals. It's some really, really intense things that happen in this area. So I don't doubt that for a minute. Man, it's almost like you need to have a big meeting with all your neighbors and have like a cookout or something and be like, all right, let's get all the Bigfoot stories out in the open, guys. Get a game plan here.
So I think that's the thing about, move out in the woods. It's like pretty much everybody owns a gun. Everybody leaves each other alone. If you need a neighbor, they're there to help, kind of thing. That's just kind of the mentality out here. And so, if you see each other passing, it's like, hey, how you doing? But yeah, that kind of really go on out here.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to out in the sticks, Iowa, in a way. Yeah, but if something happens, man, those people are there for you, no doubt. They're good people. Yep. So, wow, intense stuff. My goodness. Is this a thing where, so you mentioned that it's been a while since stuff has happened for you, right?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Is it a thing where you would want stuff like this to happen again, or you're okay with it settling down for a while?
After I kind of molded over and, I kind of don't like necessarily going back, like going over exactly how I felt at the time. Sometimes it will come back. I feel it. Oh, that just reminded me of another thing, which you're talking about getting, incidences. Yeah, I wouldn't mind, because I think actually these things kind of wanted to interact with me. is one reason, because, I mean, there's a couple other things I just remembered. I think they did want to interact with me. And the whole gifting thing, I had actually, right after I had had my first 2 sightings, I called the BFRO and the guy that contacted me, and he's like, well, this is before I actually saw one face to face or whatever. He couldn't even report it. I mean, he couldn't even put it on the BFRO thing at the time because I just saw the eyes. All I saw were eyes at the time I contacted him.
It still happened to you, right? It doesn't take away from that being real. So, yeah.
Exactly. Really, exactly. But another instance, on my way home from work one morning, and of course, you see roadkill, like a deer, like if a deer gets hit, you see blood out the mouth or broken legs or squished or something. There's blood somewhere. Well, on my way to work or on my way home from work, on the side of an embankment, it was a bare embankment. There was like a root or a large stick or something sticking out of this embankment. And this deer on the side of the embankment, I mean, it was kind of steep. If a deer had fallen off of it, it would fell to the bottom. I mean, anyway, the neck was bent backwards, broke backwards. There was no blood, no nothing. And it was like leaned over this stick that was sticking out of the embankment. And the whole gifting thing, and that's what I thought. Maybe, it thought I was going out hunting at night every time I would leave the house, and, and maybe I was inept at killing something, so maybe it was going to gift me something. And there was that, and two, like I said, backtracking, remembering this stuff. Before I had my sighting and where I was working at the time, high security had cameras everywhere. I was like, the night manager person on call there on site. And all of a sudden, the police just showed up out of nowhere. Of course, they can get in. The police in the area can get into the facility, into the, gated area. And I'm seeing all these police on camera. I'm like, what the heck? What's going on? And all of a sudden, I get a call from 911 saying, stay inside and make sure the doors are locked, of course. And they're crawling around everywhere. And then, my boss calls and said, what's going on? And, and I tell her, and, I said, I saw nothing on camera. And I lay there and listened to podcasts and watched the camera. That's what I did pretty much all night. Nothing there. And we never could, or I never could, my boss never could at the time, couldn't find out who reported the incident. Somebody was trying to get over the fence, is what was reported. And no, the police chief never told my boss who reported it or what they said they saw trying to get over the fence or what. They just reported that somebody was trying to go over the fence. And I look back on that, and maybe this thing, me listening to these podcasts and, if it, identified me with my vehicle, maybe it followed me to work because I only worked like 25 miles at the time from my house. So I don't know. And it could very easily get to my work through the woods or down the small highway that, my work was off of to get there without being seen. So, there's all kinds of weird stuff that you kind of, in retrospect, you kind of look back and you wonder, well, this is really weird. This is not something that's normal. Is it really attributed to Bigfoot, or are you just losing your mind because you actually saw these things? And, it's like, what else could it be? It's like, somebody please tell me what else it could have been,
It's such an interesting thing right there, because on the one hand, we don't know a lot about your job, which is fine, but logically, you're right, it would either be trying to get in, if it was a Bigfoot that was trying to scale a fence, or potentially there's something in that place where you worked where it was trying to get those, whatever this company does. And it sounds like, since you're the one that knows that probably is not a logical option there.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, it could have been somebody, but I don't think so, because the issues that we have that go on at that place that went on, there could potentially have been somebody trying to scale the fence. But we had, since I was there for like 5 years, there was never anybody ever tried to scale the fence. So, I mean, it was just kind of weird, because anybody that knows the place know that the police aren't far away and the police are always on call, and, they'll be there very shortly and you could get your behind shots.
Right, exactly. Yeah, don't mess around in Georgia. Now, you've had the opportunity, or however you want to view it, of being able to see a Bigfoot a few times. Based on what you've experienced and what you've seen, do you have a leaning either way towards what we're actually dealing with when we talk about Bigfoot? Could it be maybe an undiscovered ape or something that's more human-like? Anything in your mind regarding that?
I actually think it's some sort of primate. It's like I was saying about the one that the younger, what I believe to be the younger one, looking like an ape. I think it's like anything else because, you look at animals, how they look, any kind of like baby gorilla, human, whatever, they have this baby face, and then as they grow up, they actually get an adult face. And I think that's pretty much what the deal is. And their adult face just happens to look more human than a, gorilla or a chimpanzee or something. I think they're just another ape, and I think they're just curious about us. And I actually, just from the stories about, some of the Indians around the country talking about, trading with them and this, that, and the other, I actually think they are capable of something like that, because if you look at, some of the gorilla things they've done, studies and sign languages and how gorillas can use, or monkeys or chimpanzees or whatever, can actually use tools and, like get a stick and dig in and get ants out or whatever. It's like these things, if they're human, I don't think they would be living in the woods. Because, I know very few humans who would just go off the grid and live in the woods with no electricity and no anything. So I actually think these are some sort of ape type thing. Of course, we're apes too, but yeah, I just think they're just something that nobody wants to admit that are there, because it would scare the pants off of everybody that went into the woods. And yeah,
it's definitely a thing where when disclosure happens, because it will happen one day, there's a lot of people's paradigms that will be forever changed, and it'll change society 100% across the board. Have you ever been over to the museum in LJ or Blue Ridge?
As a matter of fact, I have.
Yeah.
Yes. I spoke to the young lady in there, and she told me about her episode on your podcast, and that's how I actually got to your podcast.
Oh, nice. Thanks, Amanda.
Yep.
She's great. Wow, that's awesome. Have you ever spent any time in the woods out there in the Chattahoochee National Forest area or anything like that?
Not exactly. We kind of drive through there. When I was younger, we did a lot of camping, like up around Cherokee, North Carolina. Like we go to Smokemont campground. We'd go to Cades Cove a lot. Just that kind of area up in there. We didn't do a whole lot of North Georgia camping. Yeah, I never saw anything when I was up there. Like I think I mentioned earlier about when we go camping, you kind of hear things, which we went to Mammoth Caves out there, the campground out there. And I remember out there hearing something at night, like something going through garbage cans. And I remember just thought that was really weird, somebody out in all the garbage cans. And I had heard another podcast somewhere along the line where somebody else had heard, sounded like something going through the garbage cans at night. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. But North Georgia, I haven't really done too much up that way, as far as camping and outdoors stuff.
It gets pretty wild, but I'm sure you've also heard things about North Georgia as well. But Joy, it has been really enjoyable talking to you today, and you have had some really wild and interesting accounts happen over there in Northwest Georgia. I want to make sure that you were able to share everything that you came to the show prepared to talk about today.
I don't think so. I'm sure there's something else that I can't remember, but there's always something weird going on out here.
Northwest Georgia does have the weird stuff going on. Well, I appreciate you coming on, and just another question to ask you after we stop recording, but thank you so much for coming on, Joy.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bigfoot Society podcast. Every encounter we share reminds us that the world is bigger and stranger than we think, and that the truth is often hiding just beyond the tree line. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe to the channel on YouTube, hit the bell so you don't miss the next episode, and share this with a friend who's into mysteries, monsters, or the unexplained. And if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcast, please follow the show there and leave us a 5-star positive review, because all that helps more people discover the show. And remember, if you or someone you know has had a Bigfoot sighting, please, I'd love to hear from you. So email me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com and let's start the conversation. If you haven't gotten a chance yet, check out our membership community over at www.bigfootsocietypodcast.com. And that's where you can hear tomorrow's episode today, early and ad-free, and members-only episodes every week. Also, it's a place to connect with other people that are into the Bigfoot subject as much as you are. Thanks again for following along with the Bigfoot Society. Until next time, keep your eyes open, trust your gut, and never stop asking what else might be out there. And see you in the woods.